have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis in which we find ourselves, and that affects every aspect of our lives, from our family life, our intimate relations, our community life, our economic well-being, our political atmosphere. Every facet of our life is affected by this problem, and it's what I have studied for over 30 years and what I blog about every week in my articles on the two blogs that I write for, my own blog, which has hundreds of timely articles on the topic and related topics at manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. And also the blog Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life at counselingwith2lsresource.com. That's www.counselingwith2lsresource.com, where you can also find many articles that I have written. And then my 3 books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, regarded by many to be the definitive work on the subject, about to be in its, let's see, what year will this be? Gosh, I have to do the math here. It seems like this is, yes, we are into the 17th year for In Sheep's Clothing. Wow. That's, yeah, that's right. And now published in many foreign languages, a true international bestseller, about the most manipulative types that you will encounter in your life and what they're really all about, what really makes them tip, and how to deal with these kinds of folks and empower yourself in your relations with them. And then my other book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, an in-depth look at the character phenomenon that we face, the character disturbance phenomenon that we face, and what we can do about it, how to seek help, how to get the right kind of help. That's particularly of concern to many folks, getting the right kind of help when you're dealing with somebody of impaired character. And then lastly, my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome, about how our lack of genuine faith is reflected in our actions, how we betray our lack of faith by our failure to act as those who do believe. And so I write and I talk about in workshops and other venues. And by the way, I'll be doing workshops again for professionals starting in January through cross-country seminars. Mid-January and mid-February are dates that we have reserved in the middle of the week. I'll be announcing more specific details later. The cities have not yet been chosen. They have not been firmed up just yet, but as soon as they are, I will give you information about that. But we will be doing more professional workshops, and that's how I carry the message. We'll also have another webinar coming up. We promised to have one earlier this fall, but because of this arrangement that we're making for workshops, that had to be delayed. We will still have a webinar, but it will be a bit yet before that webinar is put together. And I'll have more details for you on that. But that's how I carry the message, through my books and other writings, and through this program, where we talk about, once again, what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we're in, that much of the world faces, and that is responsible for so much of our difficulty, and what we can do about it. And along those lines, my post last Friday dealt with some key characteristics of folks who, some key factors that seem to be involved in folks who later in life display the kind of integrity of character that leads to relationship and other types of success in life. And we'll be talking about that momentarily. But if you would like to join the conversation, if you have an issue that you want to discuss with me, perhaps you have a question about some of the material on the blogs, a question about something in the books, maybe a situation you want to share, maybe just a general topic you want to talk about, or a specific question you'd like me to answer for you, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. We're here live this week. I'm back from some R&R, and let me tell you, I really needed this. This last vacation was truly a vacation. I've taken some time away before, but the time away was not all R&R, unfortunately. And this last trip was so. I was down on the beach in Cancun area of Mexico, and just kicking back and relaxing and enjoying the beautiful sunrises and sunsets and the beach, the absolutely gorgeous weather. We skirted any problems related to the hurricane. My heart goes out to those folks in South Carolina who weren't so fortunate and who suffered some of the effects of the hurricane. Even though it didn't land with full force into the coast, it sure caused enough problems with flooding and with torrential downpours, bridges and homes washed away, and people stranded in cars and whatnot. My heart goes out to those folks. And I urge the listeners to do what you can. We are doing what we can to support relief efforts. You know, that's one thing about this wonderful country of ours. It is absolutely amazing to me. One of the things that, actually, I've written some articles on this. We're a generous country, a very, very generous country. And we have all of these avenues, all of these many, many avenues to give to folks who are in need. We have faith-based charities, many of which carry excellent ratings with regard to distributing funds directly to the folks that really need it, without bureaucratic waste and administrative waste. And we have other relief agencies, some of which are very, very good. In New York, when Hurricane Sandy hit in the New York, New Jersey area, I was happy to give to the Robin Hood Society because it also enjoys a fantastic reputation with regard to the amount of money, the percentage of money that's collected that actually we can trace gets into the hands of folks who need it the most, not just in the form of cash relief, but in the form of goods and services that people really need. So we have some excellent vehicles out there, in addition to the government assistance that folks want. And it is just amazing how generous we are as a people still. We open our hearts to those who are truly in need. This is a wonderful, blessed place to live. And you realize it more and more as you travel. I don't know how many of you in the listening audience have done any great deal of traveling. But the more traveling you do, the more evident it becomes to you. At least this is my experience. The more traveling you do, the more it becomes evident to you what a special and unique place we have here. Now, I know there are a lot of naysayers who poo-poo that notion, that we're not so special. I've even heard comment that there are places freer, places more embracing. This is still a pretty fantastic place. And it's my hope that in my own little way, and I know it is a little way, that in my own little way through this effort of mine, we can help restore our country to an even greater position than it has today. As I've said many times, and this is the reason why you hear at the beginning of the program and at the close of the program a patriotic piece. The reason for that is that there is an inextricable relationship between the freedoms that we enjoy and the character we must have to preserve that freedom. The way this system of ours was designed, the founders had this in mind. They clearly did. And I'm not for a minute suggesting that they didn't have their issues as well, and that we as a society didn't have big-time issues even at the time of our founding. Because as many of us now know so clearly, and many knew even then, there was a lot of hypocrisy involved in such concepts as all men and women being created equal. It was a nice sounding thing, but in reality, folks weren't treated that way. women could not be property owners. They could not vote. And of course, there was the horror and the tyranny and the injustice of slavery. And not just black slavery. We had indentured servitudes of all different kinds. We oppressed several minorities. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the whole idea of limited government intrusion into people's lives had at its foundation the idea that if people were of their own solid moral compass, then they didn't need intrusive government. They didn't need intrusive rules and regulations that inevitably, the more rules and regulations you have, the more freedom is stifled. That's just the way it is. It's an undeniable fact. The more restrictions you put on folks, the less freedom that they have. And so the whole idea was that if you leave good people with a solid, firm moral compass, really decent character, if you leave these people alone, they will naturally tend to prosper, to create wealth, and to create opportunity for others, and to build a great society. And so that's what we're all about here. That's what this whole enterprise is about. And I think we can do better. I think we can really restore our greatness. There are still very many good people out there. The silent masses who get up every day, do their duty, care for their children, lead responsible lives. These are the folks that make us great. They make us great as families, communities, and as a society. And it's up to us to build that greatness stronger once again by treasuring those values and by endorsing those values and making them cool again. And by rewarding them, instead of demeaning and degrading them and poo-pooing them. So that's part of what I have been doing, and that's why you hear what you do at the beginning and the close of the program. It's all linked together. We'll be great again as a country when we're good again as people. And it's as simple as that. And we've got plenty of good out there already. We just need to increase it. We need to reinforce what we have. And we need to talk about what has become the defining issue of our time. And we need to talk about it instead of all the other side, tangentially related issues. Once again, I don't blame our president for being upset. I'm upset. Every time there's another one of these senseless killings, mass shootings, I'm upset. And then the blame game starts. We all, in our anger, want to start pointing fingers. Where do you point the fingers? Some people point the finger at the ease of access to guns. Guns are the problem. If there weren't guns, there wouldn't be these problems. Well, true, if there weren't guns, if there were no guns at all, then folks who are homicidal would not commit homicides with guns, if there were no guns. But homicidal people and folks with character disturbances of one type or another tend to step around laws and rules and regulations. And there's a big danger, our founders knew this, in curbing the freedom to bear arms. That's right off the bat, when the Constitution was drafted, right off the bat, right after the First Amendment, they said, now, we got to do something about making sure that we don't do anything that abridges the right to bear arms. Now, I know a lot of people who have read how the beginning of the wording, the beginning wording of the amendment starts, call into question what the intent was, but we have plenty of writings by the authors and plenty of their thoughts on the subject to know what they meant and what they intended when they crafted that amendment. In order to remain free, in order to have this limited government be truly a people's government, you have to reserve the right to overthrow it. You have to reserve that right. Because governments tend to become tyrannical. Power tends to want to coalesce. Reason for that, again, boils down to character. There are those among us. As I say in my book, Character Disturbance, I take issue with the old saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I give as an example of that the power that a parent, a new parent, has over a newborn child. Almost total power. That infant is so totally helpless and dependent, and is so totally at the mercy of that parent, who has total power and control over whether that newborn life even lives or dies, or thrives. And most individuals of decent character, when given that power, or when they come by that power over that innocent, young, totally dependent life, they approach that power with a sense of trepidation and apprehension, and a concern over exercising any power that they might have in a responsible, life-nurturing way. Never dreaming of abusing that power. And if in a moment of human frailty, they should, most decent folks take issue with themselves. So having power, even having that kind of power, is not in itself corrupting. If it were, every new parent on the planet would be a tyrant, and every newborn, helpless, dependent child would not have a chance. The problem is, rather, that there are those among us who seek power for its own sake. There are those among us who rabidly seek power, and then when they secure it, they almost inevitably abuse it. Because the wielding of power is what they care about. Oh, they'll say anything to get the power. They will pander. They'll say what they have to. They are the proverbial wolves in sheep's clothing. They are exactly the folks that I wrote about in my book, In Sheep's Clothing. Playing the servant role. One of the best manipulation tactics there is. Pretending to be at your service when their true agenda is having power and exercising power. And many times purely for its own sake. So that's where the corruption lies. That's where the corruption lies. And we are fortunate to still have the ability in our country to turn this around. We are fortunate that we can elect who we want to elect. We are fortunate that we can even defeat the big money if we pool our resources well enough. If we get involved enough, we can do that. And it's incumbent upon us to do that. It's incumbent upon us to preserve, protect, and defend what has taken so long and so many lives to hone. It's incumbent upon us to do that. So, when these things happen, when these tragedies happen, and the finger pointing starts and the blame game starts, I'm just always so appalled. You know, we hear all this talk about most of these shooters, most of these bad actors, most of these mass homicidal maniacs being mentally disturbed in some way. Well, there are all kinds of mental illness, folks. And they're not all of the same character. And it does a disservice to those thousands, no millions of individuals who have suffered through no fault of their own from some kind of mental illness, a biochemical depression, maybe even a thought disorder like schizophrenia, or a true psychotic level of mood disorder like bipolar disorder. It does a disservice to all of those hundreds of thousands, if not millions of sufferers of these illnesses, to blame these kinds of acts on that. Because there are literally hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of individuals carrying these diagnoses who wouldn't even think, let alone do, these kinds of things. So what does that leave us with? Well, that leaves us with the character issue once again. It always comes back there. We don't want to admit this. We don't want to acknowledge this. We're in such a state of denial about it, and so long as we are, even our president, and bless him, I'm happy he's outraged, and I'm happy he wants to do something. But why not? Why not? For all that is holy's sake, why not, for once, acknowledge and call out what the real issue is? And that is that we unfortunately have so many among us who lack the internal resources of self-restraint and discipline and integrity and internal boundaries and limits, all of those things that form character, that when stressors mount or when they break down, they're capable of these kinds of things. To blame it merely on the illness, or to blame it on the lack of care, or to blame it on the availability of the weapon is to miss the point completely. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. If you don't agree, I'd like to hear from you just as well as if you do. If you want to join the conversation, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to take your call. But sooner or later, folks, we are going to have to face this issue head on. The issue will force us to address it because it's only going to get worse. I promise you that. I have studied this phenomenon long enough. And I've been around long enough. And I've heard the arguments, too, from folks, there's nothing new under the sun. Well, there isn't anybody that I know my age. And, sometimes we older folks are discounted for what is perceived to be an inherent bias in our perceptions, simply because we are older. But there is a certain wisdom that sometimes comes with experience. I know from my own professional experience, regardless of not only the quality of the training that I initially got, but the continuing training and education that all people in professions have to get, whether they be in the medical profession, a psychological profession, social work, or any other discipline. We all have to be continually educated, and we have to keep up with the research. The psych abstracts will fill a library. Just the abstracts alone of studies, there's so many of them, will fill volumes in libraries. There's so much to keep up with. But experience is also a teacher. And I can tell you that there's no substitute. Any physician will tell you this too. There's no substitute for that day in, day out contact with your patient or your client. And you try out things you've been told that should work. And when they don't work, you got to modify your game plan. If you really care about the person, if you really want them to be well, if you really have any kind of regard for them, you have to listen to them. You have to observe what's happening. You have to be observant about whether or not what you've done, whether or not the book says it's going to help, whether it really does help. And then be willing to modify your approach. If you really want them to be well, sometimes it takes an awful lot of trial and error. We're not perfect at this. I see we have a call coming in. I'm going to take this call. Hello, and welcome to Character Matters.
Yeah, hello. I'm listening to you on the radio. I guess the timing's off a little bit here because you're still talking and I'm talking to you. So.
Yeah, you just turned on your radio. You speak fine.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I have a question here. I'm under the assumption, or I truly believe that we are products of our parents, and our parents are products of our grandparents, and so on and so forth. And what I'm getting to is the DNA cannot be changed of a person. So, in other words, my father has serious character defects, and I have character defects. And I went to counseling, and I told the counselor once that you can't change who you are. You can only try to alleviate some of these problems, and you have to work almost on a constant basis, daily basis, to make sure that you don't let these character defects out. However, you don't ever get rid of them, and that's my belief. You do not ever get rid of character defects. It doesn't go away simply by saying that. If I follow this certain kind of counseling, if I do this or that, then it'll go away. It's like an alcoholic, okay? You'll never stop being an alcoholic. You can only arrest the problem by not drinking, but you're always going.
Yeah, would you mind if we clarify just the one minor point here? I think
sure.
I think what you're talking about here is innate tendencies. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that if you come to the table with certain innate proclivities, certain innate tendencies, they're not going to disappear.
Right.
Right. To say that you can't change in character is a slightly different thing to say than to say that you can't change a basic innate trait, because you can, to an extent, change who you are by the mere fact that you're really willing to pay attention to that trait and to really work hard consistently at modifying it as best as you can. That is a character quality, and it may be a character quality that you didn't have early on in your life, but you have developed. So you can, to a degree, change in character, but you're right. You cannot change your innate predispositions or traits. That's true.
Right. And so, growing up as a child, my father, who had a very rough life as a kid, and I understand that, he used to try to teach me math when I was, 7, 8, whatever age I was. And he used to say, "Ken, what's 7 times 7? I just told you." And the more he yelled, the more anxiety rose, and I could literally feel it.
Yes.
And he has the belief that you beat somebody over the head enough, they'll learn it.
Yeah.
Well, that may work. Some people believe that smacking your child's okay.
Yeah.
If he smacked me as a child, I would go after him.
Yeah.
Because you don't do that. Initially, I don't believe that's undisciplined discipline.
Yeah.
And to do that to a child is wrong. And from that time on, he's always been just,
if you don't mind, I want to emphasize something you just said because I think it's important. You in passing mentioned that another child might respond differently because each person is wired just a little bit differently and comes to the table with their own different traits. So I think that's an important point that you made just there, and that what you're saying is that for you, given the way you tended to be, this especially was not a good approach for you. It probably isn't the best approach for anybody, right? But for you in particular, given what you came to the table with, this was not a good approach for you. So instead of helping, it what?
It just turned me away from him. My father and I have hardly any communication today. I'm 55 years old. I mean, this has been going on since I was a child. I've seen him smack my mother across the face. I've seen that as a child.
Yeah.
I've seen him abuse my brother. We're in the bathtub splashing water on ourselves, and he got pissed off. He came in and smacked my brother across the head. And I remember from that point on, I pointed at him, and I started crying. I said, leave him alone. And I was a young child, and I'm telling you, there was one point where he walked up to me when I was 18. He confronted me like he was going to hit me, and I said, "You go ahead and hit me, and I will kill you." And I'm telling you, I meant it, and I would have. That's how angry I was at 18 from all the abuse that I put up with. Yeah. And he's just lucky that he didn't touch me.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just telling you. And so now the interesting thing is my father and I are just alike. We're exactly alike. I've had abusive issues in my past with girlfriends.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're exactly alike because you seem to have a high awareness of some things that your father apparently did not have. You may have some tendencies that he has, and you may see them in yourself. But that doesn't mean you're exactly alike.
Right. Well, I guess what my call is here is I listen to you on a regular basis, and I like what you say. I agree with a lot of what you talk about. Identify a lot with what you talk about. But I guess what I'm saying is I never was under the belief that a person just by listening to counseling could ever change, and it's a completely different.
Well, hang on here. Bear with me for just a minute, okay? Because this is my big soapbox. Let me tell you why most counseling doesn't work.
Okay.
This problem is challenging, just as you say. And I'm really going to be, because, you can tell I'm just fired up. Because nothing makes me more outraged than the sense of hopelessness people have when they go for help with counseling for these issues. You're correct. These traits are difficult to modify, and they are impossible to modify with our traditional counseling methods. The fault is twofold. Part of the problem is that because certain tendencies are innate, they're not just learned. We used to think that everything was purely learned. We now know better. We probably always knew better. We just didn't want to admit it. But these innate tendencies and these learned patterns are very difficult to arrest. And they are absolutely impossible to turn around with traditional counseling approaches. That's why I spent my whole career developing new approaches that had at least some power to help people modify. Not cure, not change completely, not completely change stripes, but to at least be able to function more adaptively, more socially appropriately, to change enough in character to make their lives different. And that's what I've spent my career doing. But nothing upsets me more than knowing that so many hundreds of thousands of people write off counseling because their experience has been so horrible. And it's precisely because they come to the table with a problem that's difficult to arrest, and it's impossible to arrest with the traditional approaches that we have always used. I make the analogy, it's like somebody trying to do brain surgery with dentist tools. That's what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on that would be what's the best way to counsel instead of the traditional?
One of the things, for example, let's you used your father as an example, and you talked about this mindset that he had. Do you think he was ill-intended, or do you think he was misguided?
I think he was misguided, and I think his intentions were good. I don't think he ever really wanted to hurt his kids.
Okay.
That's
and see, 9 times out of the 10, that's the case. And so what we do in the kind of therapy that works is we address the thinking. We address it directly. In other words, this attitude, this point of view, this perspective is flawed. And people can come to see it. They can. What we as human beings are capable of that lower creatures are not is we are capable of a level of learning that no other creatures are. We have a higher capacity to learn. We have so many unused neurons in our brain, billions of them. We have a capacity to learn, and not only that, our brain is so plastic that we actually can change the structures in our brain through our learning. Do you know that they have done brain scans of people who have undergone certain kinds of cognitive behavioral treatments for, say, anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, and people who have gotten treatment strictly by chemical means, and they've looked at their brains, and the exact same changes take place in the brain in the exact same places when the therapy is effective, regardless whether it's chemical or cognitive behavioral. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. You can tell how it infuriates me. It just boggles my mind how we now know better. And so how many clinicians out there still malpractice when it comes to character disturbance. It's unfathomable to me, which is why I write and why I blog and why I do this program. I'm going to keep shouting from the rooftops as long as I can, as long as my voice holds out, and as long as I'm graced with life on earth. I'm going to keep shouting about this because there is help available, but you're just going to be doomed if you're going to try to go the traditional counseling route. Talk therapy will not help you.
It's the thinking.
It's the thinking. And it's the behavior. And you can confront that too. You can confront that in a way. It's called benign confrontation. It's a real art. It's a real artful loving, where you actually confront the behavior in the moment that it's occurring, and you highlight it to a point where the person sees it in a new light, and you invite them to change it and try out something new. And then they have that aha experience. And for the first time maybe in their whole life, they think, oh my gosh, there's another way to get to that goal I was after. There's another way to do this. Oh my goodness. And this other way I've been doing it all along that I thought was the only way I could, well, it's second rate. Oh my goodness, I had no idea. And it's like the light bulb goes off for the first time. And even then, that insight's not enough. They have to rehearse and practice and be confronted over and over again until new habits take hold. It's a whole different kind of therapy.
Right.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I can tell you that I have done consultations with people all over this globe, hundreds of thousands of them, many just like you, who said the same things. I don't think I can change. I'm just like so-and-so. Or I came out of this kind of environment, so I don't think it's possible. And I can tell you that I could, if they would allow it, maybe I will do that. Maybe I will invite some of these people to call in. Maybe I'll actually, You know what I'll start doing? You've given me an idea here, because I think people need to hear witness bearing from other people who've kind of been in the same situation. Maybe I'm going to ask some of these folks who have really struggled with character issues. And maybe some of them were of the kind of character where they didn't think there was anything wrong with them. They thought everybody else had the problem. And for years and years and years, they did horrible things and didn't particularly care and never came to their senses until later on. I'm going to suggest to these folks when I'm doing the consultations that that they allow for contact and they allow for guesting on the program and tell their story. I think people need to hear from folks who have been there and done that there actually is some hope, just not through the traditional means that we've always been told.
Well, that sounds interesting. And I don't want to take any more of your time. I just wanted to thank you for all you do, Dr. Simon, and I'm going to order one of your books here pretty shortly.
Well, I hope you do, and I hope you read the articles. And I can't thank you enough for the call. What a great call! You raised some really great issues, and I'm so glad you did. So
thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to call in. Appreciate it.
Okay, you take care.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. What a great call. Wow. And you could tell it got me on my soapbox. I can't tell you. I've heard this comment so many times from so many people. And it just gets my dander up. And I also, unfortunately, I've heard from so many people, why I even wrote my books in the first place. I'll tell you why I wrote my books. Because people who were on the victim end of a really character-disturbed person, they were in a relationship with a real no-goodnik, somebody who was abusive in so many subtle ways. And they tried to get help. They went to counseling. They tried joint counseling. They tried individual counseling. And it didn't work. Got another call coming in. I'm going to take it. Hello, and welcome to Character Matters.
Hi, Dr. Simon. Welcome back. I'm so glad that you was having a good time last weekend and wasn't out for another hernia surgery.
Well, thank you very much. And me too. I'm glad that it was a different kind of break.
That was a great call. This is Vince, by the way, and as always, I like to say how much I enjoy what you do. And to talk about what the fellow was just talking about there, of course, I think that he and I might share some similarities in our upbringing, and perhaps my dad wasn't as much a violent behavior towards me until I got a little older, maybe, but maybe that was out of his frustration. I guess about 14, 15 is when, I started straying off the path that so many successful people or people that have a good character, that have followed. But time is short right now. That'd be something I'd like to talk further. I've revealed a little bit about myself, and I enjoy your being able to kind of look inside my head. But I wanted to give a big shout out to one of our listeners in chat. He's had to leave a little early this evening to go pick up pizza and catch the premiere of Walking Dead. But he bought after listening 2 weeks ago, he bought your book, In Sheep's Clothing, and he's reading it now, and he has made comment to some of better understandings that he's getting so far from reading your book. So big shout out to
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for mentioning that. I'm probably the most fortunate person on earth. I really am. In Sheep's Clothing started as a small independent publication in 1995. I was carrying it with me to workshops in a spiral-bound fashion. Then in 1996, an even smaller outfit that I co-owned published it in paperback, and through word of mouth only, just through one person picking it up at a time and posting reviews and passing the word on to others, it caught fire. And now in 20-some countries, and so and a 17-year shelf life is unheard of in the business. Books like Road Less Traveled, People of the Lie, and In Sheep's Clothing, these things just don't happen very often. They just really don't. And I owe it all to word of mouth.
Well, I think that speaks volumes about you having stepped outside the box of thinking. And on towards that, our way of thinking, our way of talking to one another is very much dependent on us coming with, the same understanding of our grammar and on towards the logic and rhetoric. And I think that's where a disconnect comes so many times, especially with people that have done a lot of study and have assumed to have an understanding just by coming out of books and stuff. So a big shout out to you for being able to step away from tradition and being able to go beyond that.
Well, thank you very much. I learned early on in my practice that I was ill-equipped to deal with the phenomenon of our time, and I just could not, in good conscience, continue to malpractice. So I basically had to let my clients teach me. And what I've written about is what I've learned. And my clients have been the best teacher.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Simon, and thanks again for the broadcast. I enjoy you each week, and we'll see you on the radio next week.
Great. Thanks for the call.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Boy, a couple of great calls tonight. But as I was saying earlier, and the caller here just allowed me to reinforce this. This is why I've written my books. This is why I did it. People came to me and said, "We're getting no help. What am I dealing with here? How do I deal with it? Is there any hope?" And what I wanted to do two things with my books. I wanted to lay out in easily digestible ways just exactly what the problem is, so people could see it for what it is and understand it, get some peace of mind knowing what they were dealing with, that they weren't crazy, and then tell them what had to happen to make it better, how they could empower themselves. And that, shall we say, is the history of it all. And that changed everything for me. It changed my life. And continues to do so. This year, my current publisher, this week, I had just gotten back, actually, from my vacation. And this week, my current publisher said that although there really is nothing but bootlegging going on in mainland China, in Taiwan, there is a market that is more pure and not prone to bootlegging. And so we'll be in yet another foreign market within sheep's clothing and character disturbance, it looks like, in just a matter of weeks. This problem of character disturbance is worldwide. Everybody's struggling with it. Everybody's searching for answers. We will not solve it by pointing our fingers everywhere else. We have to call out the elephant in the room and deal with it. And I'll be here next week to talk more about it again and invite you to tune in and invite you to call in. And until then, I'm Dr. George Simon, re-emphasizing that character really does matter. It matters to all of us and our freedoms. So tune in again next week for another edition of Character Matters. I'll be with you then.